Well, good morning, everyone. This is our October 11th post-service discussion where we are blessed to have the Reverend Dennis Reynolds, and we are talking about his sermon, Living in a Dewdrop World. So welcome, Dennis. And I believe JC wanted to go first.
I found myself quite fascinated about the dukkha and the importance of leaving it as dukkha, so that every time I might come across it, I would know I don't understand. I need to search out what the meaning of this is here. And then I realized, as I was going into the kitchen to get water and stuff, maybe that would mean that dukkha could be one of the threads. When the dog runs away with the existing story, the dukkha thread might be one that would be wonderful for us to pull ahead to run into the next story. Because it's not a thing, if we're trying to get rid of the concept of suffering and open it to what dukkha really means, that might be a very good study. And I thank you for putting them both in the beginning and the end of your sermon so that we can make that.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because when I, encountered that and looked at that again this week, because I've had other conversations, including with my own Buddhist teacher, about some of that language, dukkha, being really not translatable into English. And I was struck by, as I think about it now, the Japanese Zen focus on the notion of a koan, which is a problem story that has no clear answer or solution. And that the point of koan is to invite you to contemplate possibilities rather than to come to a clear answer. And that process of exploring and contemplating is, in a way, its own reward. It deepens our contemplation. Sometimes you come to a solution. I had a friend and neighbor when I lived on Whidbey Island. Corey and his wife both met in a monastery in Japan. Teresa had also worked as a hospice chaplain. The Roshi, Harada Roshi, has a monastery in Japan and spends a couple of weeks every year in another small monastery on Whidbey Island. And they had been part of his community for many years. And Corey was a monk there and spent 5 years in the monastery. He described once that in a meeting with the Roshi had asked him, what is the meaning of death? And then invited him to ponder that. And he came back, next week, and he shared some words, and the Roshi kind of waved him off. Came back the next week and the next week. And finally, the Roshi asked him the question again. And Corey was sitting there in a meditation pose, and he just fell over and stopped moving. And the Roshi laughed and said, "Well, you're ready for the next koan." It's like, when Corey described that as, what does that mean, Corey? He says, "I don't know. I guess that's the point." It just is. So that whole sense of life just is. And it is impermanent, and it is all of these things that we attach to. And that's what creates difficulty for us, is my understanding of that kind of teaching. But again, you invite us when it's an X. We don't come to a place where we say, oh, now I get it. It's like, oh, I think maybe possibly I might have a little glimmer of something.
Right. Yeah. But I don't control it in any way because I haven't thought about it enough.
Yet. And yet.
Right. I'm done.
Laleen, you were next.
Gosh, Dennis, that was pretty amazing for me. And hi, Lucy and Connie. I'm about to have a birthday, number 79, and just a little over 2 weeks. So I've kind of been doing sort of one of those life things. And the sermon today just fit so beautifully into my thoughts, especially of this past week, since today is also National Coming Out Day. And for me, that is a huge marker in my life and my life's work. So my thoughts today, listening to you, settled on dukkha being impermanent, dukkha being the nature of life, and dukkha being affect or feeling that one best not cling to. So with those three things in mind, I thought about what I've been thinking about all week around coming out. And I would like to take a couple minutes to share that. Coming out for me happened way back in the 60s, but the coming out part I want to talk about is the coming out of the 70s. And those of you who have looked at your newsletter, you found a little piece in there about Evelyn Hooker's study and the change that created in society over time. But for me, the 70s were about my own coming out, but coming out in a very huge way, coming out in a way that after getting thrown out of an apartment building I'd only been living in for, a short period of time, and my mother was coming to visit for Thanksgiving, and I was terrified that the manager was going to say something because I was in the closet. So I had promised myself I was not going to live my life like that around anything. And so in 1971, I got involved in the formation of what came to be known in the world as the LA Gay and Lesbian Center. And my first biggest coming out was a public service announcement in 73, I think, where I said, "Hi, my name's Laleen Fifield. If you're a gay or lesbian person sitting out there feeling isolated and alone, come down to the center and join us." And so the 70s for me and many others was a time of huge, huge dukkha, in the sense of people everywhere, we're trying coming out, we're trying to step out of our closets or the homes in which we had confined ourselves and lived a different world than what we lived outside. And then the Briggs Initiative came in 78. And I happened to be teaching in his congressional district, and I was out in college, in campus, and my students rallied, and we had these stickers that said a gay was here, and they took them all over his district, and they just plastered them in the bathroom so that when you sat down on the toilet, it said a gay is here, or a gay was here. Or put them next to the urinals, and you're pissing, and it says a gay was here, and it started to spread. And then a wonderful psychiatrist friend of mine and I put together what we called a coming out group, because we were convinced that in order for everyone to change their biased minds, they needed to meet more people who were gay and lesbian. And the way to do that was to trust that maybe the people who love you most wouldn't always throw you out. So we did this, and it grew all over California in 2008. And then it started to grow nationally over the years, and gay people were coming out and coming out. And then the AIDS crisis hit. And all of that former homophobia, that gay disease, that fear
Christina.
happened. And so once again, if you look at the idea of dukkha, you know, how does one deal with that when something of that magnitude comes? What we came to do and what I've come to do in my life, as I've shared before, is not to lose hope. You know, you just keep on knowing that this is never, never permanent. Things will change. What came out of the game? Disease, celebrations of life, a whole different way of looking at death. And eventually, slowly changes in society. What came out of that? People were coming out. People were dying as they came out. People died, then they came out. A change in culture. And what came out of that? The idea of union, of being closer. Not only acceptance in your nuclear families and your friendships, but maybe there could be acceptance in a relationship. Marriage? Oh my God. And did not bring a backlash again of homophobia and cultural, you know, discrimination and hate. But people hung on, and more people came out, and the world continued to change. Well, now we got, you know, something going on in Washington, and it's not, you know, not just one group that's being picked on or could be. It's a whole lot of people who could be picked on in a really meaningful way. And so if I take what I've been thinking about for this past couple of weeks, starting with the idea that Evelyn Hooker said, I'm not mentally deranged and sick, and I don't need to have a label on me that puts me in a mental institution. And people shouldn't be locked up because they love somebody of the same sex. And then eventually, now, mind you, that happened in the late 60s. It took until 1996 to actually remove homosexuality as a mental disorder, but nothing stays permanent. So thank you, Dennis, for that. It's changed my day today. It lifted my spirits again. And it reminds me always that life changes, and the things that we have experienced over COVID will change our lives again immensely. I mean, some of us have found the deepest of relationships, and others have experienced the worst of their isolation. What will we do with that? How will we change that? How will people grow from that? So dukkha, thank you. It's a good language.
Thank you. It's one of those times where the preacher gets to say amen. Yeah. And the sense, and just to share a little bit, sometimes the progress moves even further than we're initially aware of. And that sense of change that's positive. There's also the changes as in the story that are disruptions, that we have to stay the course after them. But my daughter, who's been staying with us in the tiny house next to our house, she did her graduate work in global health. And she's a researcher in that field. And she shared some information that's moving within the World Health Organization. They are changing the definition of trans identities from a mental health issue to a medical health issue related to what goes on around the biology of such change. And that's a profound policy level at a global level. You know, that's going on behind the scenes of redefining all the various aspects that are humanity and human existence. And so once in a while, those threads are still there,
Yeah.
as you said, to perhaps build upon some of those threads as we continue the reweaving we're going to have to do now. No matter what happens in the elections, there's some reweaving to do because lots has been disrupted. I started a conversation with Michael and Martha to try to figure out what to plan to say November 8th when we won't know what happened in the elections yet. So I'm working. on
Good
that.
luck.
But I have to hold that lightly.
We had a good talk about that.
Yeah,
We
we
gave
did.
you some good suggestions. I think,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, Martha gave some good suggestions.
Oh, well, whatever. Well,
That's some good
you know.
perspectives as well, Michael.
One of the things, can I just add something? The word that stuck out to me was the word lovelessness. Can you
Yes.
talk more on that? That really, and I was scrolling through your text of your speech that I have, and I didn't see, I don't know where that word was, but it just hit me between the eyelashes.
It was
Well,
in
lovelessness was in the piece from Lisa Friedman that we.
That's
all-
where it was.
Oh.
Right. Oh, yes. Okay.
And she only used it once. And I was struck by it too. And that's even after you said it, I intentionally repeated it because I found that a profound word. And I think it's a choice that we have. Maybe that's when we recognize her line is, I don't have it in front of me at the moment because I didn't have a hard copy and my pad's downstairs and I can't leave the computer to get at it. But she talks about greed and fear, and those negative aspects of dukkha could be redefined as lovelessness, a more inclusive word. And as we embrace the theology of love, there is an alternate to that that's lovelessness. I think I haven't seen, I don't know that it's a real word, but we're familiar with the word of thoughtlessness.
Yep.
What it means to be thoughtless. But again, maybe that's another good koan for us, an X, if you will, to ponder the depth of meaning behind a word like lovelessness.
yeah. Cool.
Connie wants to talk.
Connie, did I miss your hand? I'm sorry.
I had it.
Oh, okay. Well, please go ahead.
Do we have to unmute or we're
Nope.
just
No,
unmuted?
no. Yeah, you're live. I haven't muted anyone because we don't have a huge group. So
Okay.
yeah.
When Dennis was talking about being trapped inside because of asthma during the smoky situation, that word trapped really hit home with me, and how often I hear people say that. I'm trapped inside, I'm trapped inside. And the thought that came to me is, who's trapped inside are all the people we have in prisons, or all these people who are in these migrant camps all over the world. So it really gave me kind of a wake-up call on myself using that word trapped. So I'd like to throw that out and see what anybody thinks about that.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, you want to start us off, or?
Well, I just want to thank you for highlighting that piece, because what you've got me sort of recontemplating the sense of I had 10 days. That's a pretty short sentence, if you will. That's a pretty short period of confinement. And I found it unsettling and very disturbing and very difficult. And I think you're right to look at that piece of recognizing that there are people who are confined, trapped, if you will, for a much longer period of time. Trapped by circumstances is often the reality in a world of mass incarceration. So thank you for that. Helps me kind of contemplate more deeply. I mean, how privileged I am that I only had to do it for a few days. And we did have some N95 masks, so I could go out for a little bit. When you look at, people working in the fields to harvest the food that shows up in our grocery stores in the midst of smoke incursions. My issue was minor and of limited duration.
The other part that I felt we needed to look at is, and talk about, is if we have these negative feelings about being trapped inside, or the hopeless or helpless feelings, well, what about these other people? I think in you highlighting compassion, that's an area that we can take this experience that we all have felt and put that into compassion. That's my take on that.
Mhm.
Can we just start, Michael, if we have something?
Sure. Yeah, I was looking for people, so I'll give my weekly reminder. Write into the chat if you want to go next, or wave your hands around.
So
But
funny, that's beautiful. That's real, because to me, if I feel trapped, there is something or someone that is affected by my behavior. In other words, I'm trapped because I'm afraid of someone, I'm afraid of something, maybe I'm even afraid of thoughts that are happening to me, but there's fear in there somewhere when there's trapped. And I think that might help us understand why compassion is so important, because back to lovelessness, trapped is a state of lovelessness. It might be fearful, it might be shame, it might be a lot of things, none of which really are based on love. That's just what I was thinking as you were talking.
Martha, I see you, but Glennis wanted to go next.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
It's okay either way. The queuing in on the word trapped during this, both the COVID thing and the smoke thing, and for me it came about a little bit later into the COVID thing than when it started. But I saw instead of trapped or confinement, I felt an opportunity to explore things within my own realm, within my own home, within my own music. I played a lot of piano. I did a lot of writing. So, I think it might be in how you view it. But what I wanted to also speak to was the different categories of dukkha, and like the suffering and pain is dukkha, right? And the impermanence or change, or I mean, it's just happiness at one point, that's dukkha. But what I see it as is kind of like an oscillating wavelength, like the dukkha would be, whoa, like that. Because yes, my experience has been that happiness is not a permanent state. It's a state that kind of ups and downs, and hopefully it's not this. So I just wondered if it was kind of one way to think of it, or what?
Well, I mean, part of that is, and I'm a relatively young student in terms of looking closer at Buddhism. I was smitten by Thich Nhat Hanh in the 70s by his words. But as I've shared before, and I may share a little more on the 8th, I was never able to establish a practice because I couldn't sit quietly that long.
Yeah.
But a word that I think is a aspirational word is the sense of real equanimity, a calmness, equanimity is, I think, the best word, to be able to sit with whatever it is, and just be present. Happiness is the state of being at this moment, and in the next present moment. It may be something very different. It may be a different moment. I'm going to take a minute because sitting on my desk, and I didn't even know it was here on his continuation day, or otherwise known as birthday, is one of the first books of Thich Nhat Hanh's that I had, called Present Moment, Wonderful Moment. And I'm going to look, it was published in, it's 1990 originally. So it's not one of his earliest ones, but he has a piece about throwing out the garbage. And I'll just share his little verse, and then I won't take too much time with this. In the garbage, I see a rose. In the rose, I see the garbage. Everything is in transformation. Even permanence is impermanent. And then he goes on and talks about compost. And a rose can become compost. That whole sense of everything is in change. And that compost in the next season can become a rose all over again. Mm-hmm. And that's the pieces that I sit with in contemplative practice. And fortunately, neither Koan masters in Zen traditions nor Unitarian Universalist ministers are expected to have a definitive answer.
We've been joined by Julianne. It looks like she's had a few technical difficulties, but I'm glad you're here, Julianne. So.
There she is. Hi.
Yeah, yeah, she's here. Okay, who's next?
Martha.
Well,
Martha, yeah.
I did go through and I found that reading, and it's by Brene Brown. It was the closing.
The end. Right,
yeah.
Right.
And
right.
I just wanted to read this line. It says, knowing and experiencing love means calling shame, fear, dehumanization, and injustice by their birth name, which is lovelessness.
Yeah.
So you'll talk about, there are people trapped, getting back to this whole paradigm of trapped by lovelessness and don't know how to get out. That was where I was going with that. And it says lovelessness, it means finding love in beauty, art, music, and nature. That really, I'm going to put that down someplace where I can look at that often. Thank you, Dennis, for that.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, should I start calling on people? Lucy, do you feel like adding anything?
I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay. All right. How about you, Paul? What do you think?
I'm enjoying listening. Thank you.
During the sermon and listening about dukkha, it seems so simple of the concept of dukkha, but I think that our difficulty is that I think humans like to pretend that nothing changes, that life is always going to be like it was and will continue to be. So change is something that does not come easily to our psyche. And I think that is one of our biggest challenges in embracing a concept like dukkha.
Yeah. Anybody who owns a cat knows how change is. Dennis, did you want to respond to that?
No, I think it's, it is a challenge, and particularly in our culture, that I think we do want to get comfortable with a particular kind of status quo if we're in a comfortable position. And when we're not, then we're more uncomfortable. So that's part of it. We seek comfort rather than recognizing that maybe comfort is dukkha. It's just what we experience at a particular moment.
Okay, great. JC wanted to say something.
Off of Martha's last comment, it did strike me while I was listening, Dennis, that lovelessness has all those parts of it. But if I hold on to that, then everything is about love. Its presence or its non-presence. So that would mean that fear, shame, guilt, all those things don't stand as love's equal in meaning. They're down one because they are all lovelessness. Therefore, focusing on them separately is not going to their cure or their release. You have to just look at how is not having love active actually what I'm suffering from. Therefore, don't look for whatever, go look for love. Which is why we all need one another. Because if I'm feeling angry or guilty or shamed, I don't need you to tell me I'm not shameful. Just tell me you love me anyway.
Love living with this woman.
So when they say love is all, everything, well, if I take that viewpoint, then there's either things that are love and things that aren't. And they aren't equals.
Mm-mm.
That's going to take a while to get used to. Jeez.
Go ahead, Martha.
I remember the statement about X as in an algebraic equation, okay?
Yes.
I think we're all trying to find, or let me say not all, people try to find what the meaning of X is and then stick with it, like it's supposed to be the only thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Society has everything, it appears to be in buckets. It's this bucket, this bucket, this bucket. And instead of looking at the entire group of everything, I mean, there's too many linear thinkers. I don't know. That statement really jolted me as in, okay, I try to put everything in a meaning, and meaning is fluid, just like what JC was saying, and they're not equal. So I'm going to have to work on my Xness.
Right.
Which happens often when one finds a little obstacle in one's life. So I know I have a lot of work to do.
Martha, I like that little phrase, meaning is fluid.
Yeah, it
I think
is.
that really is part of it, that we gain understanding and we don't grasp that. We continue to look for new understandings. I mean, conversations I've had with friends in the LGBTQ community who talk about the AIDS pandemic is when it became a gay and lesbian community, because the lesbian communities were the ones who were there to support gays who were dying of AIDS. And that there was some difficulty, and in some communities still is, with including trans communities. Women's gatherings where trans women are not welcome have been some struggles in recent years. And and that continual growing of expansion of meaning is fluid. I think that's just one of many examples that attitudes change. And we're challenged to sometimes be uncomfortable as we try to change ourselves and even our language and use of pronouns to stay caught up. Rather than accepting that phrase. I was going to jot down something about ambiguity, but I think meaning is fluid is probably a better construct than looking at things that are ambiguous. They mean a particular thing at a particular point in time in a context for each of us. So, and I have to share real quickly, part of what's significant to me in this story is the part about the big black dog. This is the one I live with. So who's Big Black Dog?
Who's that big black dog?
Right.
What is
I-
your black dog's name?
This is Amy the dog, Amy Dog.
I had
Okay.
to make sure my cat was fed so that she wouldn't be yowling at me. She caught a mouse at about 5 o'clock this morning. So that's,
Did she
I've
come
been
visit me?
Yeah,
So you've had a very fluid existence,
That's
haven't you?
that's right. Kim, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you feel like saying anything?
Well, I'm not sure because I'm not sure that I understand any of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I've never really even heard of Buddha much.
Yeah. Well, what do you
Yeah.
think? Yeah. Well, maybe we can narrow it. Was there any part of the service that kind of stood out to you as being?
One, I wasn't sure what. Yeah, I had a hard time. I tried to listen to it several times to try to get something.
Okay.
Good job.
And I fell asleep in the process sometimes.
Yeah, Lillian, I see you, but Lurley, let's
Just real
go
quick.
first. Yeah.
Kim, when I was listening to you, I was thinking earlier
Or
about
not.
if I had never heard that, the words I would put in there would be faith and hope. When you think in terms of some of the quotes and some of the people that have been drawn from and Buddhism and all of that, there's a whole piece in there that if I think of it in sort of Christianity traditional terms, it's really about faith and in hope and trust, but definitely faith that this too will pass. Life will change. My beliefs, my worship, my God, whatever that would be, I have faith in, and that will carry me through. So I don't know if that translates for you, but just a thought.
Yeah.
That's actually.
So one policy that I we haven't had explicit is just if somebody hasn't spoken yet, like there's the phrase of nobody speaks twice until everybody speaks once, kind of thing. So please go in order. Go ahead, Lurley.
I just wanted to express my appreciation for this discussion. It has clarified a lot for me on Dennis's talk. So I appreciate all of your input and thank you, Dennis.
Agreed. I appreciate it too. In fact, I'm pondering of, how and where is there a continuing thread? To use that metaphor again in terms of what I'm pondering, to put together some words to look at, around the 8. And the phrase that I drew a box around on my notes is finding love in art, music, and nature. Where do we find that antidote to lovelessness is the things that I'm pondering right now.
And then we could have the hymn "Thanks Be for These."
Mhm.
Yeah.
See, that's why you're the music guy.
Oh, right. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you. Okay. Julianne, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you feel like saying something? Oh, wait, you're muted. Hang on. Let me ask you to unmute.
Being such a little quit being such a little.
Yeah, it looks. Julianne, can you hear us?
Have to stop.
Oh dear, I don't think she can. I think she's still. So she was working really hard to get into the room, unfortunately. Yeah. Julianne, if you can hear us, maybe you could type into the. Oh wait, there you go. There you go. Now we got it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah. You're a little broken, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Me, okay. Yeah, yes, this is technological nightmare today. Trapped
It
by
happened.
lovelessness was the phrase I'll take away. And I think that there's so many people suffering literally that, and in the public discourse and on news, we're not seeing much love. And it is just a thought that I should take a moment and send love to the people in this country, to the COVID victims and their families, and the unemployed who are growing by the thousands every week. There is not much love being spread afoot in the US today. And a group meditation to send love would not be out of order.
Yeah.
Another opportunity for the preacher to say amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now, so everybody's had something to say. Does anybody have any thoughts?
I have something I want to say.
Go ahead, Connie.
Well, this has nothing to do with the content of the sermon, but it has to do with the shirt that Dennis chose to wear. That shirt, when I watched the sermon, I was like, oh my God, that material's from Guatemala. And so if you hadn't said a word, Dennis, my little heart would be just pounding with joy because of your shirt.
Thank you. This is a thing that I'll share with you folks. It's behind the scenes stuff. For a long time, and I'm finally stepping away with it, I would wear a tie on Sunday mornings to make me feel more serious and grown up in some unusual way. You know, some of my colleagues preach in robes and wear stoles on a regular basis. You know, I do that for, you know, ministerial gatherings and stuff. And I have a couple of beautiful stoles, and I'll share them on a Sunday coming up at some point, one of my several beautiful stoles. But I made an intentional, I used to choose the tie related to what I was talking about. So I decided I was definitely going to have to wear the Guatemalan shirt when I was talking about weavers.
Very well done.
And I got it back out of the closet again this morning to bring it back. So, you know, sometimes those subtle things that are there, other people notice what I'm up to too. Now I'm going to have to be, now that I admitted this, I'm going to have to be intentional every Sunday I'm with you. Actually, it's Wednesday. I have to decide what I'm going to wear on Wednesday or Thursday when we record. And then try to remember to put the same shirt on again on Sunday when I talk to you. Or maybe it'll be stole next time. We'll see.
Well, we do have to maintain an illusion here.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have no sense of whether or not wearing shorts or sweatpants or jeans, whatever. Or
You could be completely bottomless.
I wasn't going to go there.
Yeah. Well, it feels like we are winding down. So
you think we've degraded to that point, Michael?
Well, hey, it doesn't bother me, man. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Okay. Well, then I guess we can adjourn for this Sunday. And Dennis, it is always such a pleasure to hear from you and to have you speaking to this congregation. Maybe you can send us off with a final thought.
Let's see. I guess the piece is, may all beings be happy and at their ease. May they be joyous and live in safety.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dennis. I
Thank
hope you all
Dennis.
enjoy your Sunday, and looking forward to doing it next week. Okay. Bye-bye.
Michael, before we go,
Yes.
call me so I can talk with you about my music.
Okay. I'll do that right away.
Okay.